Today we will be talking mainly on fussy eaters. Parents are concerned that children are not having their meals properly as they want them to be, and parents are concerned that the children are not growing like their other kids whom they see in school, in preschool, and even as relatives, children who are growing better. I would start from the initial phase on when a newborn is born. Basically, we make sure that the mother has established breastfeeding, which is on most occasions a straightforward issue. But there are many instances where mothers fail to breastfeed and may need to be supported to achieve proper breastfeeding, and there we term them lactation failure, which should not be happening. In some mothers, it is very, very difficult, and it is very important for us to re-review, like reteaching, to make sure that the latching is fine and the mother is fully involved with the feeding, and there is a lot of support at home for the baby to be fed well. The assessment of whether the feeding is adequate is for the baby to sleep well after a feed, and maybe woken up in about 2-3 hours, or wakes up on his own in about 2-3 hours and is fed again. The initial phase, the feeding is basically irregular on demand, and with time, over the first 4 weeks, the babies establish good breastfeeding and they continue to breastfeed. Sri Lanka is well known to be breastfeeding at a much higher rate than other countries, and we have, I think, I would say over 90%, 95% breastfeeding establishment in most of the mothers, and which is much more in the government sector than the private sector. Once they are breastfed in the first 5 to 6 months of life, and then the weaning commences, the WHO, that is the World Health Organization, has given the green light to be weaned at 6 months, but there are several occasions where babies may need to be weaned early for logistical reasons of mothers going for work. The baby is not taking the milk enough, and the mother feels that the baby needs something more, and maybe that you can start weaning foods even after 17 to 18 weeks, that is during the 5th or 6th month. So when you start weaning, it's very important for us to realize the fact that we don't add salt nor sugar. So basically, no added salt, no added sugar. It's two important things. And we have gone a long way out of giving liquid foods like kanji, which is not in the system at all now. So please don't start giving kanji when you wean the baby. There is no nutrition in it. And you need to increase the nutrition by giving semi-solid food, and also, if needed, adding fat later on in life. So weaning commences around the 5th month to 6th month, and we make sure that the baby is having enough semi-solid to solid food, which is mashed up without any pieces, on a regular fashion. And the child health development record, which is available with all mothers who deliver their babies either in the public or the private sector, which gives you, if you look at the growth chart on that, I'm sorry that I don't have a printout to show you all here, which shows basically the lines of demarcation on which the babies grow. So there's a nice saying: if you are born small, you be small and grow small, but later on you may catch up. If you are born big, you be big. If you are born in the midline, you go down on the midline. So it is very important for the healthcare providers and the mother to realize the fact that when you are born in a centile line, which is mentioned on those, they are given different colors from downwards. If you are well below, you are red, then you are orange, you are yellow, then you are light green, dark green, then you become going to the danger zone above also, which the colors change. So if you are going on the midline, then you grow on the midline, and this is one reason why we weigh babies regularly when they come to the clinic and make sure that the weight gain is appropriate. And most of the time the babies have feeding regularly, plus they have been weaned and they are taking their solids and they are growing well. But we have instances where mothers come and say, especially after the first birthday or even before that the babies are not feeding well, they are not basically taking enough solids, the babies are not growing, the other children are eating and growing well, and there are multiple complaints. And in our personal practice, it's sometimes very difficult to convince mothers that all babies are not alike, and some eat, some don't eat much. But as far as they are growing appropriately, it is fine. It is very important for us to go through the chart as with the parents and show them that basically if you have been born small, you'll go on the lower lines, and as far as they are not crossing centile lines, we call it, they are not dipping down and they go parallel to those centile lines, they are considered to be growing adequately. Right. So why do babies fuss to eat is the main concern. One, as a traumatic event, mothers also tend to push food into the babies and they get an aversion to food. So never try to force feed baby. Very important. That is the first take-home message, where you realize the fact that you should never be force feeding the baby. And if you don't force feed, then babies settle down on most occasions and then do well to be basically taking appropriate meals. You establish weaning by starting on you start with one new item a day, and you progress every third to fourth day, you add a new item, and never ever mix 2-3 new items on the same day. So you start with 1 teaspoon, then the next day you grade up to about 2-3 teaspoons, and the third day you can give what we call belly full. That's about 1.5 teacups or a small soup bowl, equivalent food. When you give that amount of food, you need to give that in place of milk. And then you realize the fact that you are taking over from a completely milk-based diet to a semi-solid plus a milk-based diet. So you basically complement in place of milk, you supply the semi-solid meal. And we try to establish at least 3 solid meals over the next month or 3 to 4 weeks, where the babies will be having a breakfast, a lunch, and a dinner, which basically the baby will take in. And mothers are advised to continue breastfeeding. And one more thing that we should realize is that when we breastfeed, we have to realize that the breastfeeding goes in as a dessert following solid meal and never as an entree. That is, if you try to breastfeed before a solid meal and then try to give a solid meal, the babies may not be taking the meal. So you have to allow the baby to get hungry and then make sure that the baby is having his dessert as milk or whatever you're giving as a fruit juice or water, which goes in after the solid meal. And when we establish this sort of diet, we have to realize the fact that baby's bowel open is adequate, the passing of urine is adequate, the baby is comfortable, and on most occasions your weight gain is appropriate and you're fine. So when we talk about fussy eaters, as I told you, number one reason, never force feed, and realize the fact that babies need to make sure that they are taking their meals regularly without being force-fed. So allow them to get hungry and then give the meal. 1. 2. You need to, what can you give in the initial phase? You can start with a rice base. You can give mashed rice. You can add potato. You can add vegetables, which have all to be mashed up. Then you can add fruits. You can give a top-up with a fruit juice. And I always, as a personal practice, convince parents to make some homemade cereal, where you have a combination of rice flour, ulundu, kadala, cowpea, and green gram, separately soaked, roasted, and grounded in powder form, which can be mixed and give, you put some hot water, make it like a paste. You can add a bit of oil later on in life, in the next second, third week of life, either white coconut oil, Cook's Joy, whichever you like to add on, or gingery oil, olive oil, to give you more energy. So adding oil is something, and as a personal practice, I prefer patients to have the babies to have primary oils than looking at processed foods. So we are for primary food, we are for hygienic homegrown food, We are for organic food, and we prefer you not to use processed foods in babies as far as possible. So, as I told you, you establish a breakfast, a lunch, and a dinner. So in a way that you start with 1 teaspoon of rice on day 1, you give 2-3 teaspoons of rice on day 2, you give 1.5 teacups full of rice-based mashed up. You can add a bit of breast milk to it to make it a bit more fluffy and a bit more pasty, and the baby will take it. And when you have given it, you can top up with a bit of breast milk, or even give water. Learn to give water after meals. And we prefer you to establish a cup and spoon feeding style so that the babies get used to the sucking and the swallowing mechanism while breastfeeding. They learn to swallow semi-solid food off a spoon, which makes it easy. They learn to get the taste also, but still we prefer you not to add salt and sugar so that the babies don't have problems with their kidney function and for them to become obese. So we want to prevent 2 things. The kidneys have to function well. Number 2, they should not become obese. So we don't want obese babies. So for that reason, please do not add salt and sugar, and they establish well with semi-solid food. So over the second year of life, if you really watch them and see that 2 reasons why babies don't eat well. 1, they are continuously breastfed at night. Maybe that the mother is not producing enough, but the baby is so bonded to the mother, baby is sleeping with the mother, and the baby continues to breastfeed at night. And I always mention this to the mothers and tell them, you have to wean them off slowly from night feeding, which is comfort sucking. They are satisfied mentally that they are getting some food, and they don't realize the fact that their weight gain will start dropping, or they have growth faltering solely because they may not be hungry in the morning session for them to eat well. So the terminology of breakfast is breaking fast. So you are expected to fast overnight and have a good meal in the morning. So try your best for the babies over 1 year that they have a good solid meal at dinner time, have a breastfeed or milk feed, and then basically go to bed and be able to sleep for about 6 to 8 hours so that they can be fed in the morning as usual without being fed throughout the night every 2 to 3 hours. So the night feeding has to get weaned off slowly, and the babies settle down. There are enough babies who breastfeed at night and eat well in the morning, with whom we don't have any much of a problem. But children who are fussy eaters, that we have this issue. And there's one more thing. One is comfort sucking. Second thing is that they like to imitate adults. So it's very important for us to give them the option of feeding themselves after the first birthday. They may spill around, but give them on the table, give them a plate with some food and with a spoon, and they would pick with the spoon and eat, or pick with their fingers and eat. And they would like to enjoy doing that while you have your meal, while you feed them. So it is a combined session where the mother or the father or everyone at home sits and eats on the dinner table or on the lunch table, and they basically join the baby or joins in to have a meal and looks at the others and enjoys having his or her meal. So it's very important for us to realize the fact that comfort sucking and establishing solid meals with the baby getting involved while he having his all 3 meals is very, very important. But there are situations where we have looked at all these physiological corrections and still the babies are not eating, and they are nauseating and they are vomiting, and what we call, they may be growth faltering. Their weight gain is poor. So we should not forget that there may be other reasons for it. So when we examine the baby, we look for reasons of whether there is a low hemoglobin or what we call anemia, where the baby's color, the pinkishness or the reddishness is not enough, and whether the baby has been having difficulty in passing urine or having episodes of fever, where there may be an occult infection, what we call a hidden infection, which may need to be excluded. So it's very important to make sure that they are growing according to centile lines, number 1. They are also basically going according to what their birth weight has been, and they have been weaned at 5 to 6 months. They are taking enough solid food, and they are basically growing well. When you go to the clinic, make sure that the baby is weighed and you have appropriate advice on whether you need multivitamins, whether you need iron supplements, whether you need medicines like folic acid, all that. And the babies are growing well and they are developmentally fine. And it is very important in the secondary with fussy eaters that you have a 1:1 interaction with your baby. And as the WHO, the World Health Organization, has mentioned, no screen time for under 2 years. So please learn to be with your baby, and this is the best time during these curfew hours for you to spend more time with your baby than watching TV, and basically have a 1-to-1 interaction and making sure that your baby is developing well. Thank you very much for listening, and we will come back to you with more details later on in this session over the course of next 2 to 3 weeks. Thank you.